My name's Jeremy Wade. I'm a biologist with a passion for dangerous fish. The big, the bad, and the ugly.
What a monster this thing is.
Now, I'm after a predator that's invading America.
Watch your pets, watch your children.
It has spawned horror movies and stands accused of homicide.
These fish have reportedly attacked humans.
Allegedly, it can even breathe air and crawl on land. But how much of this can I actually believe? I intend to separate fact from fiction and to find out firsthand if this beast really does attack people. Does its bite match the hype? And could these so-called Frankenfish take over? I've been investigating dangerous freshwater fish for over 20 years, but I've never come across an animal quite like this before. According to this website, they hunt in packs. It says here they have a poisonous bite, cannibalistic, eats everything in its path, breathes air and walks on land. Some of these reports make it sound like some kind of primeval throwback. A creature from before the dinosaurs, when fish were first starting to crawl out of the swamps. There's a story here from Malaysia of a man apparently castrated. And another story here from Thailand, apparently somebody killed. To find out if these horrific reports are true, I'll be heading to Southeast Asia. As well as finding eyewitnesses, I want to track down the monster that stands accused. The snakehead is a fish born with a taste for flesh, a beauty that turns into a beast. This seems like a fish that punches well above its weight. If just half of what I'm reading is true, then the snakehead really is a beast to be reckoned with. I want to meet this fish in the flesh and find out what it is truly capable of. Can they really breathe air and crawl across land? Is it true that they are spreading like a virus, devouring everything in their path? And are they really aggressive enough to attack and kill a human? My search for this alleged killer begins in a place where it doesn't belong. I'm in South Florida, pursuing an animal that's traveled halfway around the world and is now busy invading new territory far from its natural home. When Bob Newland pulled a weird-looking creature from a Miami backwater in 2000, he took it to Florida's exotic fish lab to find out what it was.
When I got it there, I just dropped it right on the floor. I said, "Okay, Paul, what is this?" And he just looked at me and said, "Oh, I don't know." And then he got a big book and he looked in the book, and eventually Paul came over and he said, "This is what it is. It's a snakehead." After that, he wanted to know exactly where I caught it, and I said, "I caught it on a golf course in Tamarack." And then he said, "No, I need to know what hole you found it on."
Government scientist Paul Scharfland had to act fast.
What we had hoped was that they would only be in one pond. And if they're in one pond, we could go in and eradicate.
But when his team checked the surrounding canals, it was bad news.
Snakehead 583.
The invaders were already on the move.
South Florida is a maze of interconnected canals. We couldn't have created a more ideal habitat for snakeheads.
Scharfland is up against the bullseye snakehead, but this is just one member of a much larger gang. Snakeheads are in fact a group of almost 30 different species that range in size from a small flick knife to a 4-foot torpedo. They're ambush predators with long camouflage bodies, ripping teeth, and a reputation for extreme aggression. Their global empire already stretches from tropical Africa to the Far East, including Russia. and they seem to be spreading. Soon after Newland's discovery, a second species surfaced in Maryland, just 20 miles from Washington, D.C. The northern snakehead is built to survive cold Siberian winters, and its presence set off alarm bells in the government and the media.
These fish are top-level predators that will eat anything in their path. They can travel across land and live out of water for 3 days. Snakeheads reportedly even attacked humans.
This just sort of took off and it exploded with the media. People were calling in and saying, do we have to worry about our children being attacked on the way to school? Can we leave our pets outside in the yard, or will the snakeheads eat them?
Meanwhile, scientists from the Fish and Wildlife Department feared that these snakeheads could unleash ecological havoc. And in a bid to wipe them out, they poisoned an entire pond, killing every last fish. Yet despite efforts to exterminate them, northern snakeheads are now established in 5 states across the eastern US. Media hype is one thing, but when a government is spending millions of dollars to fight a fish, you know you've got a serious problem. I never expected that I'd be fishing in a quiet residential area for fish that have been branded worse than piranhas. I'm in South Florida, just a few miles from where snakeheads first showed up. To catch one of these alien invaders, I'm using a lure that imitates live prey. Most baits and lures, you've got the hook exposed, but here, if a fish grabs it, that's what happens. I hook up with local guide Alan Zaremba, an experienced snakehead angler.
Very nice.
Look at that.
Oh, there's one. Oh, no more.
First cast, and the frog had a huge lump of salad with it as well, and the fish went for meat and veg, but didn't hook up. That was a hit and a miss.
That's another snakehead. The problem with the snakeheads, when they attack, you get one shot at them. They don't come back for a second shot.
But what do they eat? I mean, it's not just fish, is it?
They'll eat anything that's moving that they can ambush.
The adults at least appear to be lone hunters. They're not swarming in packs like piranhas. But as I work the banks, it's clear that these canals are crawling with snakeheads.
Oh, yes, what? Ah! And there was a hit.
There was a hit.
Take another long cast up that way.
Yeah.
Maybe he's got some amigos here. Good shot.
Are these fish still part of the first wave, I wonder? Or has an invasion already become an occupation?
They're here, and they're not going to stop them. You're not going to stop these fish. They seem to love these shallow areas, especially when you get some weeds piled up so they get up underneath the weeds.
Did you see that?
No, let drop. And set the hook.
That is a fish on. That one came out right from the side, didn't it? That came out 4 or 5 feet. This wake just arrowing out. I've hooked my first snakehead. And what it lacks in size, it more than makes up for with attitude. There we go. That's it. Oh, a bullseye snakehead. So now I've actually got my hands on one of these things, I can see why it's called a snakehead. Very long, thin, still muscular fish. I think very often, fish which are long and quite snake-like, do give quite strong fights. And this particular one is called a bullseye snakehead. It's got this eye spot on the tail. Have a look inside the mouth. There we go. That's definitely the mouth of a predator. All those teeth there. And it's not just smaller fish that it eats things like frogs. I mean, that's what I was using, an imitation frog, but also things like lizards, rats, even small ducks. These fish are clearly carnivorous. But do they deserve their reputation for extreme aggression? It's very easy to go on the internet, and just in a matter of a few minutes you can find stuff like this. These are clips put up by people who keep pet snakeheads, and this is what happens when they feed them live fish. Just like pet snakes, these predatory fish prefer their food alive. When they strike, it just happens too fast to see it, and it's certainly too fast for the small fish to take any avoiding action. People always talk about predators being aggressive, but I mean, most predators actually kill for a reason. They need food, but these fish here, they just seem to kill as a reflex. They'll bite something in half and then just leave it to die. I'm used to fishing for predators, but actually seeing the moment of the strike like this in lurid close-up, I have to say, is pretty gruesome. They really do seem to be natural-born killers. These pet snakeheads are mere minnows. Just imagine what a 40-pounder could do to a child or a dog. Looking at these clips really begs the question, who set these violent offenders loose in America, and why?
1226 of 1950, 23 request.
Lieutenant Pat Reynolds keeps a close eye on the illegal wildlife trade in South Florida and was called in to investigate.
I think they're getting a delivery of saltwater products here. That the guy has a game fish in the back of his truck and you cannot sell it.
When this fish was first found in the waterways here, what was your involvement then, leading on from that?
I was alerted by our fishery biologist. They suspected very strongly that these were released, particularly in the Oriental trade or the Asian trade. Quite frankly, the first store I went into had them, and we tracked them back to New York City. They were coming in through New York, brought down here by an Oriental wholesaler who was distributing them to the markets. I inspect the airport in Miami, and yes, they did come in. We made arrests and we seized the fish.
Possessing a live snakehead can now land you in jail, but you're allowed to catch and even sell these fish if you put them on ice. Snakeheads are highly prized by many Asian Americans, and not just because they taste good.
How much did they go for?
So what did they actually,
about $15,
what did they actually,
$20 a piece.
Oh, 15 or 20 each.
When we sell it.
When you sell it.
What they believe is a medical purpose, especially when people have the operation. They said after they eat the soup, it helps them to recover.
Helps the healing process.
That's why the people would pay for that price.
Yeah. We believe they were intentionally released with the idea that they could, that an entrepreneur, a businessman, was going to go catch them and sell them into this trade.
So not somebody keeping one in a tank and it's just too big, or they get bored with them and in the water.
No,
so
somebody intentionally put them out there so they could go harvest them later. And they wouldn't have to import them from New York. Here's what we tell everybody. If you catch them, because they are good eating, don't throw it back. Put it on ice, take it home and eat it.
Lieutenant Reynolds never did catch the entrepreneur who dropped the bullseye snakehead into Florida. And since it first turned up in 2000, the invader has continued to spread inland. I'm now at the very edge of the canal network, where it borders on the Everglades National Park. Could snakeheads have come this far?
You laying it right on top of something there.
Actually hit it. That was a peacock, wasn't it? So this is a snakehead. That would be it. But this is a peacock bass, territorial. Yeah. The peacock bass is also a non-native predator, but it was brought in officially as a biological control to eat invasive species like tilapia. Its intolerance to cold water prevents it from spreading. This is another fish that is a long way away from home. This one is a native of the Amazon. This is a peacock bass, what they call a butterfly peacock bass. It's one of the, it's the smaller variety of those. Definitely a predator, big mouth, but not as toothy as the snakehead, but very capacious mouth there. And one thing that's interesting about this, it's also got an eye spot. I mean, that's why they call this the peacock bass. So it's similar in that respect to the snakehead. But one noticeable difference between this and the snakehead is the body shape. This one is flattened that way, laterally. If this was to fall on the ground and kick, it would just sort of flop around in the same position. The snakehead is flattened that way. If that falls on the ground and flaps around, it's actually going to move. The snakehead can wriggle its way overland and then find a new home, and that's why they're worried about them here. Soon after they arrived here, snakeheads caught the imagination of filmmakers. The alien invaders were cast as slithering assassins, as superfish that could somehow crawl out of the water and attack dogs, or unsuspecting humans. It's easy to dismiss this movie monster as pure fantasy, and yet, remarkably, much of it is based on fact.
Some of the traits that the media picked up on are true. The fish can survive out of water. Some of them can move over land. They do have high levels of aggression.
Does this mean that snakeheads could, under certain conditions, become the backyard predators of our nightmares? Fish biologist Ray Waldner has studied snakeheads in detail.
It is an air breather. It can use atmospheric oxygen. You'll see the fish come up to the surface and literally lift its head up a little bit, grab a mouthful of air, and then submerge again.
Snakeheads have a special chamber above the gills that acts as a simple lung. When it gulps air, oxygen diffuses into an encircling mesh of blood vessels.
If they're in a very stagnant area where the oxygen levels in the water are very, very low, the fish are still able to survive. So they can survive under conditions that would definitely kill other fishes. But it also allows a fish to live out of the water.
So far, so Hollywood. But are snakeheads mobile enough to threaten anyone on land? A few years ago, Paul Schafland brought some back to his lab and put them to the test.
He's moving, okay? But he's not making a real directional movement. Most of the time, they sat like this with a little bit of flipping, but the snakehead has just soft pectorals. It doesn't have a way to support itself. They seem to burn out pretty quick.
Experts agree that some snakeheads do travel across land. In areas with seasonal flooding, it enables them to spread into new lakes and rivers. The patio-prowling monster, however, looks suspiciously like a myth. In their element, I've seen that snakeheads hit fast and hit hard.
They are very aggressive. Anything that comes close, they will tear into.
Leaving aside any possible threat to people, I'm starting to wonder what happens to other animals when the fish equivalent of special forces suddenly turns up.
I don't think there's much around that they probably wouldn't go after. Undoubtedly, the snakeheads are feeding on these native fishes, such as bass and sunfish. The crappies that we have here, golden shiners. I think all of those are fair game, and there are numerous others as well.
If there's anything that's a little bit different about the bullseye snakehead's feeding habits is the breadth of foods that it will take. If something is close enough to it and it can get it in its mouth, it'll eat it. This is a stomach from a bullseye snakehead. This is a tilapia. They'll also eat native fish. There's 2 mosquito fish in there. This is a crayfish that was in a stomach. This is the marine toad. They've even had a snake, and as you can see, the whole snake was eating. This is actually a cannibalistic snakehead. This is a juvenile snakehead. There's even been some turtles. The breadth is very interesting.
Snakeheads are starting to sound like eco-monsters, invaders with the power to mow down everything in their path.
In the snakehead, we've got a fish that could be potentially devastating. The danger is to the native fishes, native aquatic species. That's where the problem lies.
Snakeheads, it seems, hold all the aces. Not only can they thrive in stagnant water, but females are able to produce 100,000 young per year. And it gets worse.
My main concern comes because snakeheads show very extreme parental care. They vehemently, aggressively guard their spawn and will voraciously attack anything that comes close to them, anything that poses a threat.
With such fertile and protective parents, snakeheads have the potential to multiply rapidly. What's more, few native predators are willing to take on an adult snakehead, so there's little to keep them in check. But it wasn't always like this. 80 years ago, the US had a homegrown monster that outgunned any snakehead. The monstrous alligator gar can grow up to 10 feet long and weigh in at over 300 pounds. Its jaws bristle with rows of dagger-like teeth, and it is protected by a prehistoric-looking armored coat. But, accused of savage attacks on humans, this super predator has been wiped out across most of its natural range, leaving a continent-wide ecological vacuum. Virgin hunting grounds for an opportunistic hunter, like a snakehead. Nothing more than an earth bank now stands between Florida's snakehead infestation and the Everglades National Park, a vital refuge for endangered wildlife. Despite its Jack the Ripper reputation, the bullseye snakehead is, in one sense, just another addition to Florida's existing roll call of exotic wildlife. Every year, some 200 million live animals are brought into the US to supply a pet trade worth billions of dollars. And in Florida, many of these foreign imports have escaped and become permanent residents. To get an idea of how many exotic fish there are here, and to put the snakehead invasion into some kind of context, I join a fish and wildlife team on the canals. Bursts of electricity from the boat's electrodes leave any nearby fish temporarily stunned, allowing us to scoop them out and drop them into a holding tank for later inspection. That's a Florida gar, that's lovely. First one of those I've actually seen out of the water. Native species like this will be returned to the water, but any non-natives, like snakeheads, will be put on ice and killed. I'm amazed to discover such a rich mix of native and exotic species, living cheek by jowl in a single small canal. After an hour, we pull over to examine our catch.
Bluegill, 202.
And what's that? That's 140. Okay, this is a bluegill, that's a native species, so that goes back in the water. This is a bit like a fairground lucky dip.
Spotted tilapia, 129.
60 grams.
That's an exotic.
That's an exotic, so this one, not such good news, this one goes in the box.
Peacock, it's a peacock bass. 362 peacock.
Ready? Okay. And that is 750 grams. And this is a peacock bass. Although this isn't from around here, it's from South America, from the Amazon. This one was introduced officially. This one has got a visa. This is not an illegal immigrant. This one actually can go in the water.
Bullseye, snakehead, 691.
Okay, so that is 215. Unfortunately for this one, it's in the box. So I mean, it really is just a melting pot. I've seen fish from Africa, Southeast Asia, Central America, They're all here in North America. Florida currently has 32 kinds of resident exotic fish, and out of these, snakeheads are said to be the best eating. Local angler Martin Aristiki has offered to cook one up.
Well, guys, here's the snakehead.
Wonderful.
All ready.
Right, moment of truth. I've heard this is very good. It smells very good.
Put a little sauce on it.
Which one's a bit of both?
Either one.
Okay, nice and white. That's very nice. That's really nice.
I'm glad you liked it.
Though I can't swear to the snakehead's medicinal powers, I can confirm that this fish is excellent eating. With such large and tasty fillets, it's a wonder there aren't more people out there catching them for dinner. As well as providing good sport, this would also help to keep these unwanted predators in check. Just how far these intruders will spread is hard to predict. But America already has another alien invader that could perhaps show me where the snakehead story is heading. My destination is the Illinois River. Skipper and research scientist Greg Sass isn't taking any chances. What's the idea behind the nets? This gives
one little bit of defense for the driver as trying to protect himself.
Okay, and what happened there?
Occasionally we get such large ones that come up into the net with such force that they'll actually blow a hole right through it.
40 years ago, catfish farmers in the south imported a fish from China to clean up waste from the breeding ponds. Before long, some escaped into the wild and began spreading north through the Mississippi River system. Like snakeheads today, they weren't an obvious problem at first. Then, almost overnight, they became a plague. Just absolutely full of fish down here. Nice flat, calm surface, but there's loads of them down there. Quite a fish soup, in fact. It's not until Greg accelerates, though, that the show begins. These are silver carp, and at up to 40 pounds, they're a serious danger to anyone in an open boat. Quite literally, they've smashed people's ribs and knocked people overboard. Seeing these as dots on the sonar is one thing, but just the noise of our motor provokes this mass escape response. There's up to 13 tons of these fish for every mile in the river. And that's hundreds of miles. They go all the way down to the mouth of the Mississippi. Just 10 years ago, the carp were virtually unknown here. Now, they've all but taken over. Absolutely stiff with fish. There we go, look at this. There's more silver than green in the water there. I actually feel the boat being buffeted as they're banging into it. Whoops. So who needs a rod? These things just jump into the boat. The real key to the success of this fish is in here. So there's the red of the gill filaments, and then in front of that, that is basically a filter, and nothing really gets through that. That filters down to objects the size of 4 microns. That's, you know, a speck of dust. It's a bit like us feeding every time we breathe, basically. So that's why these things are putting on the weight. And by just removing everything from the water, they're leaving nothing for the native species like buffalo, which are also filter feeders, but they're just not as good at it as these chaps are. So those native species, they're gradually losing weight. And, you know, if they get too thin, they're not able to breed, and that's just why these things are taking over. As they put the squeeze on native fishes, the carp are also knocking out an entire fishing industry. If a filter feeder can cause such damage, then what about a hardcore predator? Are snakeheads, like these silver carp, also destined to explode out of control?
My guess is we're going to see some real problems arise in the next several years from snakeheads, both competing with and preying upon our native fishes. The fish had the potential to absolutely take over.
Between them, the bullseye and northern snakeheads have what it takes to overrun most of North America. If they do, then fisheries worth over $30 billion to the economy could take a massive hit. And it doesn't end here. A third, much larger member of the gang has been turning up sporadically from Maine down to Arkansas. The giant snakehead is a beast that can weigh as much as a 5-year-old child. And it comes with a nasty reputation.
I've heard stories of the giant snakehead attacking humans, and even a case of one individual being killed by a giant snakehead.
To track down this would-be invader and find out if it really is as dangerous as people say, I must travel to the far side of the world. I'm in Thailand, and I waste no time heading up country. My destination is a place called Khao Lem, a remote dam on the upper reaches of the River Kwai, close to the Burmese border. This is prime snakehead habitat, and I've come here in the middle of the monsoon, just when the fish are at their most aggressive. It's their breeding season, and they're said to attack anything that comes close to their fry, including people. Yet the giant snakehead is also a popular food fish. Many people here farm them to sell.
Snakehead really do lend themselves to this type of business, this type of culture. They are really, really tolerant to low oxygen levels in the water. And you can see they're coming up to the air, they're blowing out the spent air and taking another gulp. And also they look very pretty. They look very pretty when they're small. And you can absolutely understand why people will want to have those in their aquarium in Florida, for example.
Even in these cramped conditions, the giant snakehead fry are thriving. By 1 month, they've doubled in size and are growing ever more hungry for flesh. Breakfast is pulped fish, but this ravenous swarm has never been hand-fed. So it's going to be a test of nerve for them, as well as for me. I've watched snakeheads not much bigger than these rip into finger-sized fish.
There's one or two pecking, there's one or two.
Right up to late juvenile stage, these snakeheads school and feed together. The stories I've read of voracious packs are starting to make sense. I've come to Thailand to find out if the giant snakehead really does attack people. All the reports of snakehead attacks on humans concern just one species, the giant snakehead. Like many people here, Sombat lives by the water and often encounters these aggressive fish. What happened was that he needed to swim underneath his raft to replace some of the bamboo. It gets a bit rotten. It's as he's fixing his raft that Sombat senses something behind him. With nowhere to hide, he's face to face with a giant snakehead. It actually put its fins out, a bit like an elephant when an elephant is threatening to charge. Before Sombat can move, the fish has savaged his foot. It was actually bleeding so bad that he went to the hospital. The people there didn't believe that it was a fish that was responsible. They thought it was a dog and actually ended up giving him rabies jabs. So, I mean, what we've got here is a very dramatic example of what appears to be a completely unprovoked attack. Sombat's story proves to me that a giant snakehead will attack something far bigger than itself. It seems to be a fish that really does punch well above its weight. Like its cousin the bullseye, the giant snakehead is an ambush predator that favours areas with plenty of cover. For several hours, I worked the banks and shallow bays of the dam without getting so much as a nibble. Fishing for snakeheads here is a world away from Florida, where the hits came thick and fast. With Sombat's story still fresh in my mind, I send a lure towards an abandoned raft.
Oh, yes!
Whee! A giant snakehead. Woo! This fish is only 1/10 the size of a full-grown adult, but it's certainly got some attitude. Very toothy. I wonder if I can just get my hand in there. Its snake-like appearance has led to the belief in some places that this fish has a poisonous bite. Fortunately, this simply isn't true. That is, that is a bit of a toothy critter. Although it's got a fierce reputation, quite a beautiful fish, really. I've hand-fed the carnivorous fry and been snapped at by a bolshy juvenile. But everyone here tells me that if I want to catch the daddy, then I must first pay a visit to the man who knows how. To find this snakehead guru, I travel deeper into Khao Lem's muddy backwaters. Kun Da is the master hunter. Over the past 20 years, he's gained an unrivaled knowledge of his quarry. Forget nets or rods. For Da, catching a giant snakehead is more like armed combat, and his weapon of choice is the spear gun. The problem with this spear gun is that it takes a long time to reload. So Kun Da's actually invented his own rapid reload spear, which is much simpler but much more effective. The key feature of Da's homemade gun is that he can rearm it quickly. As he explains, this is crucial when you're hunting a fish that defends in pairs. Unusually for a fish, snakeheads fiercely guard their young. But Da's own close-quarter observations add a further twist to the story. While the father corrals the cluster of fry, the mother patrols at a distance, primed to attack anything that looks like a threat to her offspring. What's interesting is that this is coming from somebody who is actually observing these creatures closer than any scientist, and the reason for that is not only his livelihood, but possibly his life depends on it. Da knows that if he shoots one snakehead, he still has to watch his back. Stories of people being mauled by snakeheads are not uncommon round here. But now I've picked up a more disturbing lead. I crossed to the far side of Khao Lem Dam, just 12 miles from Burma. People sometimes slip across the border to fish here for a day or two, then melt back into the jungle with their catch. I'm used to tall tales, but the story I'm about to hear is so freakish that no one could possibly have made it up. Thai fisherman Kun Lang vividly recalls the Burmese couple that came here 3 years ago to hunt snakeheads. So what actually happened was that the fisherman was under the water with his spear gun, shot a snakehead head on, and actually scored a direct hit. The fish then just kept on coming and shoved the rear end of the metal spear through the fisherman's mask and into his face. The fish was just panicking so much it was thrashing. Fish doesn't have a reverse gear, it just kept flapping. Apparently the spear actually came out the back of the man's head. The
wife was still sitting in the boat, dived down into the water and found the fisherman dead. Well, I actually came here doubting these stories, doubting that this fish has actually been responsible for any fatalities. And here we have a very graphic case of a snakehead causing a human fatality. I've deliberately timed my trip here to coincide with the giant snakehead's breeding season. This is when the fish are at their most aggressive, as they guard their young against all comers. A fleeting ripple shows me where the fry have just surfaced to gulp air. By dropping my lure right on top of them, I'm trying to provoke a strike from one of the parents. But it seems that these canny adults know all about fishing lures. The only snakehead that has a go is a 10-inch juvenile. Small snakehead. With the rain beating down, it soon becomes impossible to spot the fry as they surface, let alone get the attention of the parents. I'm trying to create a disturbance on the surface to wind the fish up. When the water's calm, you've got no competition. It's the only thing making a noise. When you've got rain falling on the water, the signal's very confused. You've got to land that bait much closer to the fish to get them to notice it. The weather isn't about to let up. But worse than this, and for reasons that aren't made clear, I've just been told that I'm not allowed to fish here anymore. So if I'm ever going to get face to face with this monster, I'm going to have to pack away my rods and do it another way. I return to Kundar, the master hunter. My plan is to dive with him as he goes after the giant snakehead with nothing more than a pair of old goggles and a homemade spear gun. In these choppy conditions, I'm straining to spot the surfacing fry. Yet Kundar's predatory eye picks out the slight ripple that gives them away.
Ready? Follow.
And with our target pinpointed, the hunt can begin. I'm getting a bit nervous. It is totally another world down there. By diving with a small camera, I hope to capture the entire drama as it unfolds. Everything has to happen on a single breath. So before going under, we edge as close as we can to our target. But when Dar suddenly slips in and vanishes without trace, he leaves me scrambling to catch up. Bad weather has churned the water into a murky soup. And with Dar gone, I feel a stab of panic. I could easily wind up getting harpooned by mistake. The poor visibility is even hampering Dar. It's murky down there, it's murky. I'm having second thoughts about this. I'm starting to feel like human bait. But it's too late to pull out now. Dar is a man on a mission. When the fry break the surface barely a boat length away, we launch again. But our quarry has vanished into the murk, leaving Dar to hunt on instinct. Dar loads,
I can sense we're close. Suddenly, we're in the heart of the swarm.
I think we've got one. I'm going to keep out of the way. I'm going to keep out of the way.
With a single, well-aimed shot, Dar has caught a giant snakehead.
Sitting in a boat, dangling a line over the edge, believe me, is easy in comparison.
Despite taking a direct hit, the fish simply seems to shrug it off.
Oops, doesn't like that.
Having listened to accounts of its aggressive behaviour and seen for myself the scars on Sombat's foot, I'm well aware of what this river monster is capable of.
So there we go. But that wonderful black and white coloration, that is very much something that the fry will identify with. Bright colour, it's calling to them.
I expected this fish to end up as dinner, yet in a strange twist of fate, it's almost unharmed. Dar's spear has pierced the muscle of its back, but missed its vital organs.
We're actually going to release this fish. This is catch and release spear fishing. Very nice that this is going to go back and it is going to recover. Just hoping it doesn't double back and have a go at me as a last farewell. She's actually free now. She can go if she wants. There she goes. Well, it's actually gone back into the lake to be reunited with the young. So really good to see. You don't expect to see that from a fish caught on a spear.
Of all the encounters I've had with dangerous fish, this had to be one of the most unnerving. Down in that murky water, I could hardly see anything. I didn't know if I was going to be attacked by the fish or maybe even end up myself on the end of Kundar's spear. But over the course of my journey, a clearer picture of the snakehead has emerged. The two species that have reached America pose no direct threat to humans, although in the eyes of many, their presence is an unfolding environmental disaster. But in Southeast Asia, I have found a fish that does deserve to be called a monster. The word made flesh. This animal is already knocking on America's door. If the giant snakehead ever gains a foothold in America, then you really would have to think twice about getting in the water.
Not a shark, but it is an exceptional fish.
It's just remarkable.
That is something, isn't it? Oh, I've never seen anything like this in my life before.